At 11:47 p.m., my phone buzzed beside my bed, and I smiled because I thought it was my daughter sending another picture of my granddaughter before bedtime. Instead, I read 6 words that nearly stopped my heart. "We're done with you." Then another line appeared beneath it. "Don't ever find us again." I called Maddie instantly. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Blocked. Then Travis blocked me too. I sat frozen in my dark kitchen, staring at the family photo on my counter, my hands shaking so badly I dropped the phone onto the floor. Because deep down beneath the shock and pain, I knew my daughter hadn't really written those words. If this story touches something in your heart already, let me know in the comments. Have you ever received a message that changed your life forever? And wherever you're watching from tonight, tell me your city and what time it is there. I read every comment because sometimes strangers understand our pain better than family does. And if you enjoy emotional stories like this, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can stay with me until the very end of Casey's story. Before that text message shattered my life, I thought I understood loneliness. I had been widowed for 11 years by then. My husband Daniel died of a sudden heart attack 3 weeks after his 62nd birthday. One ordinary Tuesday morning, he kissed my forehead, complained about the bitter coffee I made, and left for work smiling. By lunchtime, he was gone. People talk about grief like it arrives all at once, like a thunderstorm crashing through your life. But for me, grief came quietly. It sat beside me at church on Sundays. It slept on the empty side of my bed. It followed me through grocery store aisles while I reached for foods Daniel used to love, and then remembered there was nobody left to cook for except myself. The only thing that kept me moving was my daughter Maddie, and later my granddaughter Emma. They became my reason to keep waking up every morning. I lived in a small suburb outside Columbus, Ohio, in the same pale blue house Daniel and I bought when Maddie was 8 years old. The neighborhood had changed over the years. The old maple trees were taller now. Most of the original families had moved away or passed on. But I stayed. I stayed because every corner of that house held memories. And because I believed family was supposed to stay connected no matter what happened. Every morning I followed the same routine. I woke up around 6:30, made coffee in the old drip machine Daniel refused to replace, and sat by the kitchen window overlooking my backyard garden. I loved gardening. Tomatoes, lavender, hydrangeas. There was something comforting about caring for living things that still needed you, especially when you were getting older. After retirement, the days became quieter. I had worked as a school librarian for almost 30 years. I loved children. I loved books. I loved helping nervous little kids discover stories that made them feel brave. Retirement sounded wonderful in theory, but silence can become dangerous when you spend too much time alone with your thoughts. That was why I poured so much love into Maddie and Emma. Every Thursday, I baked chocolate chip cookies for Emma. She was 12 then, skinny as a rail, with bright brown eyes and messy curls that always escaped her ponytail. She called me Nana Casey since she first learned to speak. Sometimes she'd run into my house yelling, "Nana, did you make the good cookies?" And I always pretended to think about it before saying, "Maybe." She would laugh and throw her arms around my waist. Those moments made me feel alive again. At least they used to. Looking back now, I can see the warning signs were there long before the text message arrived. I just didn't want to see them. Maddie used to call me almost every day, sometimes about recipes, sometimes about Emma's school drama, sometimes just to complain about life, the way daughters do, with mothers who make them feel safe. But about a year before everything fell apart, the calls started changing. Shorter, tense, careful. I remember one evening in particular. I was making chicken soup when Maddie called. At first she sounded normal enough, but then her voice dropped suddenly. "Mom," she whispered, "have you ever felt like your whole life got smaller without you realizing it?" I stopped stirring the soup. "What do you mean, honey?" There was a long silence. Then I heard Travis in the background. "Who are you talking to?" he snapped. Maddie immediately changed her tone. "Oh, nobody. Just Mom checking in." Checking in. The words hit me strangely, coldly. Not talking, not laughing, checking in. A few seconds later, Travis's voice got louder. "We're late already." Then Maddie rushed off the phone. "Sorry, Mom. I gotta go. Love you." But she sounded nervous when she said it. Not loving, nervous. I stood there in my kitchen, staring at the wall, long after the call ended. Something inside me whispered that things weren't right. But mothers are experts at lying to themselves. I told myself they were stressed financially. I told myself marriage was hard sometimes. I told myself I was imagining things because I missed my husband and worried too much. That became my pattern. Ignore. Excuse. Forgive. Repeat. Travis had always been charming around strangers. That was the dangerous part. At church picnics or school events, people loved him. He shook hands firmly, smiled easily, remembered birthdays. But privately, there was always something sharp underneath him. A quiet cruelty, little comments disguised as jokes. Oh boy, he'd laugh during dinner, here comes Casey, with another lecture about budgeting. Or, you know, your mom still treats you like you're 16, right? Maddie. Everyone would laugh awkwardly, including me, including Maddie. But afterward, Maddie always seemed smaller somehow, less certain of herself. I remember another night when they came over for dinner during winter. Snow covered the streets outside, and Emma sat on my living room floor building a puzzle while I washed dishes. Maddie came into the kitchen beside me. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, shoulders tense. Without warning, tears filled her eyes. I'm just tired, she whispered. I immediately dried my hands. Honey, what's wrong? She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something important, something real. Then Travis walked into the kitchen, and her entire face changed instantly. She smiled too fast, too brightly. Nothing she said quickly. I'm fine. Fine. That word became another lie I accepted because I wanted peace more than truth. I think older women do that sometimes. We survive our own heartbreaks and convince ourselves other women must survive theirs quietly too. So instead of pushing harder, I baked more casseroles. I slipped grocery money into Maddie's purse when she wasn't looking. I paid for Emma's school clothes every fall and pretended it was a grandmother's privilege instead of financial help. Sometimes Maddie cried when I helped. Not dramatic crying, silent crying, like someone embarrassed to be drowning. But Travis always had an explanation ready. Things are tight right now. The economy's rough. You know how expensive kids are. And because I love my daughter, I believed him. Or maybe I simply wanted to. About 3 months before the text message, Emma accidentally revealed something that still haunts me. She was sitting at my kitchen counter eating cookies while Maddie took a work call outside. Emma lowered her voice and asked, Nana Casey, do you think moms can get sad and stuck? I frowned. What do you mean, sweetheart? Emma shrugged nervously. Sometimes Mom cries after Dad goes to sleep. The room suddenly felt colder. What does your dad say when she cries? Emma looked down at her cookie. He says she makes everything harder. I felt something twist painfully inside my chest, but before I could ask another question, Maddie came back inside, smiling too brightly again. And just like always, I let the moment pass. That was the worst mistake of my life, because by the time that midnight text message arrived on my phone, the danger inside my daughter's marriage had already been growing for years, and I had completely failed to see how bad it truly was. I barely slept the night after the text message. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those words glowing on my phone screen again. We're done with you. Not Mom, not Casey. You. Cold. Final. Cruel. Around 4 a.m, I gave up trying to sleep and sat in my kitchen wrapped in Daniel's old flannel robe, staring at the dark backyard through the window. My coffee had gone cold hours earlier, but I kept holding the mug anyway because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I called Maddie again. Blocked. I texted her. No response. I tried Emma's tablet messaging app next, but the account had been disabled. That was when panic truly settled into my body. Not anger, not confusion. Panic. Because mothers know things before they can prove them. And deep inside myself, I knew something terrible had happened. At 7:30 that morning, I grabbed my car keys and drove straight to Maddie's house. The January sky over Ohio looked pale and lifeless, the roads still wet from overnight freezing rain. My windshield wipers dragged slowly across the glass, while I rehearsed explanations in my head. Maybe Maddie had a breakdown. Maybe Travis forced her to send the message during an argument. Maybe they simply needed space. I clung to every possibility except the one that hurt most, that my daughter truly hated me. When I turned onto their street, my stomach dropped instantly. Something was wrong. The house looked empty. Not abandoned exactly, but stripped. The curtains were gone from the front windows. The children's bicycle Emma always left near the porch had disappeared. Even the flower pots Maddie kept beside the garage were missing. I parked so quickly I nearly hit the curb. My heart pounded as I rushed toward the front door and knocked hard. No answer. I knocked again. Still nothing. That was when I noticed the mailbox hanging slightly open. Stuffed inside were several envelopes and grocery store flyers. Mail nobody had collected. A terrible chill crawled down my spine. I walked around to the backyard gate. Locked. No movement inside the house. No lights. Nothing. I stood there frozen in the icy wind, trying to make sense of what I was seeing, when a voice called out behind me. Mrs. Long. I turned and saw the next-door neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, standing in her driveway wearing a heavy winter coat. She looked uncomfortable. The kind of uncomfortable people look when they know something painful before you do. I was wondering if you'd come by, she said carefully. I walked toward her quickly. Where's Maddie? Mrs. Peterson hesitated. They moved out. The words hit me so hard I physically stepped backward. What moving trucks came 3 days ago, she explained softly. I assumed you knew. 3 days. 3 entire days. My daughter disappeared 3 days earlier, and I knew nothing about it. I suddenly couldn't breathe properly. Did Maddie say where they were going? Mrs. Peterson shook her head. No, but... She paused uncertainly. Things didn't seem good. I stared at her. What do you mean? She lowered her voice. There was a lot of arguing lately, mostly Travis yelling. My chest tightened. And Emma, she added sadly. That little girl looked upset. The world around me suddenly felt unreal. Like I was standing outside my own life watching it happen to somebody else. Did you see Maddie? I asked desperately. Did she say anything? Mrs. Peterson frowned. She looked exhausted, Casey. Honestly, she looked scared. Scared. The same word my mind had been avoiding for months. I thanked her numbly and walked back toward my car. But before getting inside, I glanced once more at the empty house. Then I noticed something near the garage. A pink winter glove. Emma's. I recognized it instantly because I bought the pair for her at Target before Christmas. I picked it up slowly. And for the first time since Daniel died, I broke down completely in public. I sat inside my car, clutching that tiny glove, while sobs tore through my chest so violently I could barely see. People walked dogs nearby. Cars passed. Life continued moving around me, while my own world collapsed silently inside a freezing, parked sedan. I kept replaying every recent conversation in my head, searching for answers. Had I missed signs? Had I pushed Maddie too hard? Maybe Travis was right all these years. Maybe I involved myself too much. Older mothers hear that accusation often enough. Eventually, we start believing it. Controlling, overprotective, smothering. I leaned my forehead against the steering wheel and whispered aloud, "What did I do wrong?" But even as I said it, another voice inside me whispered something else. This isn't normal. Because if Maddie truly wanted distance, why vanish overnight? Why block every form of contact? Why leave behind mail? Why make Emma disappear from school without telling anyone? None of it made sense. I forced myself to calm down enough to drive home. The house felt unbearably quiet when I walked inside. Usually by then, I'd be texting Emma silly memes or asking Maddie if they wanted dinner later in the week. Instead, I stood in my kitchen, holding a child's pink glove while silence echoed through every room. That afternoon, I tried calling again. Still blocked. I emailed Maddie. No reply. I even messaged Travis through social media, though I hated doing it. Nothing. Hours passed. Then evening came, and fear slowly transformed into something worse. Humiliation. Because the longer I sat alone in that house, the more I started imagining people talking about me. What if Maddie told others I was toxic? What if she truly believed I ruined her life? What if my granddaughter grew up hearing terrible stories about me? By 9 o'clock that night, I had reread the text message at least 50 times, searching for clues, searching for my daughter inside the words. But the message sounded strangely stiff, not like Maddie, too formal. Too cold. Maddie was emotional even when angry. If she was upset, she rambled. She explained too much. She cried. But this message felt sharp and calculated, almost rehearsed. That realization kept scratching at my mind. Then suddenly, another memory surfaced. About 6 months earlier, Travis had joked during dinner. Sometimes people need to cut family ties for their own sanity. At the time, Maddie immediately went silent, and Emma stared down at her plate. I remembered laughing awkwardly to ease the tension. God, I hated myself for that memory now. Around 10:30, I finally noticed something sitting near my front door. A small stack of mail I'd brought home absent-mindedly from Maddie's mailbox earlier that morning. Bills mostly, advertisements. But one envelope caught my attention immediately. It was thick, official looking, and addressed jointly to Maddie and Travis. Across the front in red letters were the words, "Final legal notice." My stomach twisted painfully. For several seconds, I simply stared at it. Then slowly, I opened the envelope. And that was the moment I realized my daughter's disappearance might involve far more than family conflict. My hands trembled so badly, I nearly tore the envelope while opening it. I sat at my kitchen table under the harsh yellow light above the stove, staring at papers I was never supposed to see. The notice came from a debt collection law firm in Cincinnati. At first, the legal language barely made sense to me. My eyes kept skipping over words because panic was pounding too loudly inside my head. Default judgment, outstanding balance, failure to respond, asset recovery. Then finally, I found the amount owed. $38,000. I physically covered my mouth. "Maddie," I whispered. There were multiple unpaid credit cards listed, personal loans, even a threatened vehicle repossession notice attached behind the legal papers. I flipped through the documents faster, my heartbeat growing louder with every page. How was this possible? Maddie and Travis always acted financially stable. Not wealthy, certainly, but stable. They still went on weekend trips occasionally. Emma stayed in dance lessons. Travis always wore expensive boots and carried the newest phone models. None of it made sense, unless most of it had been fake. A horrible thought suddenly entered my mind. How often had my money quietly kept them afloat without me realizing it? The grocery money, the birthday checks, the temporary utility payments, the emergency dental bill for Emma. I used to tell myself I was simply helping family, but now I wondered if I'd been unknowingly plugging holes in a sinking ship for years. I leaned back in my chair, exhausted. The house felt too quiet again. Outside, freezing rain tapped softly against the kitchen windows, while my old wall clock ticked louder than usual. Every sound suddenly felt lonely. I stared down at the paperwork again and noticed another detail. One of the accounts listed Maddie's previous employer. My stomach tightened. According to the legal notice, debt collectors had attempted wage garnishment several months earlier, but Maddie never mentioned anything about that, not once. The next morning, I couldn't sit still anymore. I showered quickly, dressed in jeans and a heavy sweater, and drove across town to the medical billing office where Maddie supposedly still worked. The entire drive there, I kept rehearsing normal explanations in my head. Maybe she forgot to tell me she switched jobs. Maybe the documents were old. Maybe Travis handled the finances and hid everything from her. I was desperately trying to construct realities that hurt less. The office building sat beside a busy shopping center filled with people carrying coffee cups and shopping bags like any ordinary Thursday morning. I envied them. Ordinary people living ordinary lives. I walked into the office lobby, clutching my purse tightly enough to hurt my fingers. A young receptionist looked up politely. "Can I help you?" "Yes," I said carefully. "I'm looking for my daughter, Madeline Cole." The receptionist frowned slightly. "Oh. Maddie doesn't work here anymore." Every muscle in my body stiffened. "What do you mean?" "She left months ago." "Months." I felt lightheaded. "Are you sure?" "Yes, ma'am." The receptionist looked uncomfortable. "I think around September, maybe September, nearly 4 months earlier." But Maddie still pretended to leave for work every morning whenever I spoke to her on the phone. I struggled to keep my voice steady. "Did she say where she was going?" The receptionist shook her head apologetically. "No. Honestly, she left pretty suddenly." Suddenly. Another word that kept repeating itself in my life lately. I thanked her numbly and walked back outside into the freezing air. For several moments, I simply stood beside my car, unable to think clearly. My daughter had lied to me for months. Not small lies, life-sized lies. And somehow I never noticed. A wave of shame rolled through me so powerfully, I had to grip the car door for balance. What kind of mother doesn't realize her own daughter lost her job? But deep down, another realization hurt even worse. Maddie hadn't merely hidden things from me, she had been hiding things from herself too. That afternoon, I stopped by a grocery store, mostly because I couldn't bear going home yet. I wandered the aisles aimlessly, throwing random things into my cart I didn't actually need. Soup, bread, coffee filters. At one point, I found myself staring blankly at a package of Emma's favorite strawberry waffles before suddenly bursting into tears right there beside the frozen foods. I turned away quickly, embarrassed. An elderly employee approached gently. "You all right, ma'am?" I forced a smile. "Yes, just tired." The lie came automatically. Women my age learn to disguise pain professionally. We call grief stress. We call heartbreak exhaustion. We call emotional devastation just having a hard week. I drove home before sunset, and while pulling into my driveway, another memory surfaced unexpectedly. A dinner from the previous summer. Travis sat at my table drinking beer while Maddie quietly served food. I remembered mentioning retirement savings during casual conversation. Nothing dramatic, just ordinary financial talk. Travis immediately laughed. "Well, Casey's the queen of budgeting." I smiled politely. Then he added something strange. "Good thing, too. Older people get scammed all the time." At the time, it sounded like random conversation. Now it sounded different. Calculated, like he'd been thinking about money even then. The memory made my skin crawl. That evening, I pulled out old birthday cards, notes, and receipts from a small storage box in my bedroom. I don't even know why. Maybe I was searching for proof my daughter still loved me. Maybe I needed evidence that our relationship had once been real. Inside the box, I found dozens of memories. Emma's kindergarten drawings, family vacation photos, Mother's Day cards. Then I found something else. A folded check carbon copy from nearly a year earlier. $5,000. I'd given it to Maddie after Travis claimed they were behind on medical expenses. I remembered that night vividly now. Maddie cried when I handed her the envelope. Not grateful crying, ashamed crying. And Travis? He barely thanked me. Instead, he immediately asked whether I still kept most of my retirement savings in the same account Daniel and I used for years. At the time, I answered casually because he was family. Now my blood ran cold remembering it. I suddenly realized Travis asked a lot of questions about my finances over the years. Too many. What bank I used, whether my mortgage was paid off, whether I had updated my will after Daniel died. Back then, I interpreted his curiosity as concern. Now every memory felt contaminated, predatory. For the first time, genuine fear entered my body. Not fear of losing my daughter, fear of something far darker. I walked into my office and opened my filing cabinet where I kept retirement documents and bank records. Everything appeared untouched. But as I flipped through folders nervously, I noticed something odd. One drawer wasn't fully closed. I frowned. I knew I had locked it earlier that month. Inside sat all my financial paperwork exactly where it belonged, except one folder. The retirement account folder had clearly been opened recently, pages slightly crooked, not how I left them. A chill spread slowly through my chest. I suddenly remembered something else. 3 weeks earlier, Travis had come by unexpectedly while I was at a doctor's appointment. He claimed he needed to borrow a toolbox from my garage. I let him inside using the spare keypad code. Alone. My breathing became shallow. No, surely not. I immediately tried dismissing the thought as paranoia, but my instincts were screaming now. Every ignored warning sign, every uncomfortable dinner, every strange financial conversation, every frightened look on Maddie's face. They were beginning to form a picture I could no longer avoid seeing. And for the first time since receiving that brutal text message, I stopped wondering whether my daughter hated me. Instead, I began wondering if someone had been planning to use me. Once suspicion enters your mind, it changes the shape of every memory. That was the frightening part. I spent the next several days trapped inside my own past, replaying years of conversations and family gatherings with completely different eyes. And the more I remembered, the more terrified I became. I stopped sleeping properly altogether. Around 2 or 3 in the morning, I'd wander through my dark house, unable to settle my thoughts. Sometimes I stood at the kitchen sink staring out at the backyard while snow drifted silently over the garden Daniel once helped me plant. Everything felt haunted now, not by ghosts, by realization. There's a specific kind of pain that comes with understanding you ignored suffering because it was easier than confronting it. That pain sat inside my chest constantly. One afternoon, I pulled out old photo albums from the living room cabinet, hoping the pictures might comfort me. Instead, they devastated me. In older photographs, Maddie looked radiant, loud, confident. She used to laugh with her whole body the way I did when I was younger. But as the years with Travis passed, subtle changes appeared. Her smile became tighter, her posture smaller. In group photos, Travis always stood, strangely close to her, one hand gripping her shoulder or waist possessively. And Maddie's eyes, God. Her eyes looked tired, even when she smiled. How had I missed it? I sat cross-legged on my living room rug, surrounded by photographs, while icy regret crawled through me. Then another memory surfaced. 3 years earlier, during Thanksgiving dinner, Emma accidentally spilled cranberry sauce across the tablecloth. She burst into tears immediately, apologizing over and over. Before I could reassure her, Travis snapped sharply. "For God's sake, Emma, stop crying over everything." The room went silent. Emma froze like a frightened rabbit. Maddie immediately rushed to clean the mess, while apologizing too, apologizing, as though a child spilling juice was some terrible offense. I remember trying to lighten the mood. "It's just a tablecloth." I'd laughed nervously, but Travis kept muttering under his breath about carelessness and wasted money. That night after they left, Daniel would have noticed something was wrong immediately, but Daniel wasn't there anymore, and I think part of me became weaker after losing him, not weak in spirit, weak in confrontation. I wanted peace desperately after grief hollowed me out, so whenever tension appeared around Travis, I smoothed it over instead of examining it. Women from my generation were trained to preserve harmony, even when harmony came at our expense, especially mothers, especially widows. I carried one photo into the kitchen and stared at it for a long time. Emma was maybe 8 years old there, sitting beside Maddie on my porch steps. Maddie had her arm wrapped tightly around her daughter while smiling directly into the camera. But even in that photo, Travis stood apart from them slightly, watching, not joining. I suddenly remembered another strange moment from that same summer. Maddie and I had gone grocery shopping alone while Travis took Emma somewhere. For almost an hour, Maddie seemed relaxed again. She laughed, talked freely, even teased me about buying too many canned soups. Then her phone rang. Travis. I watched the entire color drain from her face before she answered. "Hi," she said carefully. A pause, then quieter. "No, we're almost done." Another pause. Her shoulders tightened visibly. "We'll be home soon." By the time she hung up, she looked anxious again. I remember joking lightly. "Does he think you're joining the witness protection program?" Maddie gave a weak smile. Then she said something I didn't understand at the time. "He just likes knowing where we are. Likes knowing where we are. Not worries, not cares. Likes knowing." The memory made my stomach twist. That evening, I made tea and sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open. For the first time in my life, I searched online for phrases like emotional control in marriage and signs of psychological abuse. At first, I felt ridiculous, dramatic, like one of those people who diagnose strangers through internet articles. But as I read, my blood slowly turned cold. Isolation from family, financial control, monitoring communication, humiliation disguised as jokes, walking on eggshells, sudden personality changes, fearful behavior around spouse. I kept whispering, "Oh my God," under my breath, because every single description sounded like my daughter's life. I clicked another article, and another, then another. Hours passed without me noticing. One paragraph in particular shattered me completely. Victims of coercive control often defend or protect the abusive partner because fear and dependency become psychologically intertwined. I leaned back in my chair, stunned. For months, I had interpreted Maddie's silence as distance. Maybe it had actually been fear. Suddenly, another memory slammed into me so hard I physically gasped. About 8 months earlier, Maddie came over unexpectedly one rainy afternoon while Travis was supposedly at work. She looked exhausted. Her hands trembled while holding a coffee mug. Emma stayed unusually quiet upstairs watching television. At one point, Maddie stared out my kitchen window and whispered, "Mom, do you ever feel like you wake up one day and realize your life belongs to somebody else?" At the time, I thought she meant motherhood, stress, marriage fatigue. I gave her some meaningless advice about communication and self-care. But now I understood she may have been begging me to notice her suffering, and I failed. A sob escaped my throat before I could stop it. I buried my face in my hands at the kitchen table while guilt crashed through me in waves. What kind of mother misses cries for help from her own child? I barely noticed my phone vibrating nearby until voicemail notification sounds interrupted my thoughts. Unknown number. For one wild, hopeful second, I thought it might be Maddie. Instead, it was a debt collector looking for Travis. I hung up immediately, shaken. Then another terrifying thought occurred to me. If collectors were now calling my number, how much personal information did Travis have connected to me? That fear grew stronger the next morning when I checked my mailbox and found several financial advertisements addressed jointly to Travis and Maddie at my home address. My address, not theirs. I stared at the envelopes with rising panic. Had they changed legal records to connect themselves to my property somehow? I immediately drove to the county records office downtown. The woman behind the desk probably thought I was overreacting when I asked questions about property filings and financial claims. But after searching for several minutes, her expression changed slightly. "There was an inquiry made regarding your property last fall," she said. My pulse spiked. "What kind of inquiry?" She frowned at the screen. "Looks like preliminary information requests related to ownership transfer procedures." The room suddenly tilted around me. Ownership transfer. "Yes, ma'am, but nothing was filed officially." I gripped the edge of the desk. "Who made the request?" "I'm sorry I can't release that information without formal documentation." I walked back to my car in a complete daze. By then, the fear inside me had transformed into certainty. This was bigger than family conflict, much bigger. And for the first time in my life, I began wondering whether Travis hadn't merely manipulated my daughter, but whether he had been quietly planning something involving me for a very long time. 3 mornings later, I was standing barefoot in my kitchen making coffee when my cell phone rang from an unfamiliar number. Normally, I ignored calls I didn't recognize, but lately fear had turned every unknown number into a possible clue. "Hello, Mrs. Casey Long." The woman's voice sounded professional but cautious. "Yes, this is Sandra from First Horizon Bank's Fraud Prevention Department. We need to discuss unusual activity connected to your retirement account." For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. My coffee mug slipped slightly in my hand, hot liquid splashing across my fingers. "What kind of activity? I'm sorry to alarm you, ma'am, but we detected an attempted authorization request involving account access changes." The room went completely silent around me. What does that mean exactly? "It means someone submitted documentation requesting expanded account permissions." I gripped the kitchen counter hard enough to hurt my wrist. "Who submitted it? I can't discuss details over the phone until identity verification is completed. We'd prefer you come into the branch today." By the time I hung up, my entire body was shaking. Not ordinary nervousness, primal fear. Because suddenly, every terrible suspicion inside me no longer felt paranoid. It felt real. I dressed quickly and drove to the bank in near total silence. Even the radio made me anxious now. Every passing thought circled the same horrifying possibility. Someone was trying to access my money, and deep down, I already knew who. The bank sat downtown in a large brick building Daniel and I had used for nearly 30 years. We opened our retirement accounts there together. We planned our future there together. Walking inside without him always hurt a little. But that morning grief had no room left beside panic. Sandra turned out to be a woman around my age with silver blonde hair and gentle eyes. She led me into a private office and closed the door carefully behind us. Then she placed a folder on the desk between us. "Mrs. Long," she said quietly, "before I show you these documents, I need to ask whether you personally authorized anyone to request financial access to your accounts." "No." The answer came instantly. She nodded slowly. "That's what I suspected." My stomach twisted. Sandra opened the folder and slid several papers toward me. At first, the words blurred together. Authorization request, account modification, emergency family financial oversight. Then I saw it. A signature line with my name. Casey Elizabeth Long, signed in shaky cursive. Except it wasn't my handwriting. Not even close. "Oh my God," I whispered. Sandra spoke gently. "We flagged the request because the signature didn't fully match previous records." I stared at the paper in disbelief. Below the forged signature sat another name, Travis Cole, requesting secondary financial authorization due to mental and emotional instability concerns involving elderly account holder. My vision actually darkened for a second. Mental instability, elderly account holder. I looked up at Sandra horrified. He said I was mentally unstable. Sandra hesitated carefully. "The paperwork implied concerns regarding your ability to manage finances independently." I physically recoiled. For several seconds, I couldn't even form words. I had spent my entire adult life being careful, responsible, independent. I paid my bills on time, maintained my home, worked for nearly 3 decades, and now someone was quietly trying to paint me as confused and incapable. The humiliation burned almost as badly as the fear. "I didn't authorize any of this," I said shakily. "I believe you," Sandra replied softly. That kindness nearly broke me, because until that moment, a small terrified part of me worried, maybe I really was losing control somehow. Maybe grief and stress had clouded my judgment, but no, this was real, calculated, deliberate. Sandra continued carefully. "There's more." She handed me another document. This one referenced preliminary discussions regarding power of attorney procedures. My chest tightened painfully. Power of attorney. The legal authority to control another person's finances. I suddenly remembered Travis casually asking me years earlier whether I had updated my legal paperwork after Daniel died. At the time, I interpreted it as concern. Now every memory looked monstrous. "When was this submitted?" I asked weakly. Sandra checked the paperwork. "About 2 weeks before the disappearance." 2 weeks. That meant while Maddie still called me, pretending everything was normal, Travis may already have been trying to gain access to my retirement savings. The betrayal hit so hard I felt nauseated. But why, I whispered aloud before realizing I'd spoken. Sandra's expression softened sadly. "I've worked fraud prevention a long time, Mrs. Long. Unfortunately, family financial exploitation happens more often than people realize." Family financial exploitation. Such clinical words for something so personal. I suddenly remembered all the times Travis asked about my savings, the mortgage, the house, the will. Every conversation rearranged itself in my memory, like puzzle pieces finally forming a horrifying picture. Then another realization hit me. What if Maddie was involved? The question came out broken. Sandra paused before answering. "I can't speculate about family dynamics, but I can say this paperwork appeared primarily driven by one individual. One individual, not two." I clung to that sentence desperately, because despite everything, some stubborn part of my heart still refused to believe my daughter wanted to destroy me. Sandra helped me freeze the account temporarily and add additional fraud protections. She also strongly encouraged me to contact an attorney. When I finally walked back outside, snow drifted lightly through the gray afternoon sky. I sat inside my car for nearly 15 minutes, unable to start the engine. My entire life suddenly felt unsafe. Not physically, emotionally. Even my memories no longer belonged to me cleanly. Everything had become contaminated by suspicion. I thought about calling Maddie again, but what would I even say? "Did your husband forge documents claiming I'm mentally unstable so he could steal my retirement account?" The thought felt insane, and yet the paperwork existed. I drove home slowly, gripping the steering wheel too tightly the entire way. Halfway there, my phone buzzed with another fraud alert notification. My heart nearly stopped. I pulled into a pharmacy parking lot immediately and opened the message. There had been another attempted login into my online banking portal from a device in Tennessee. Tennessee. I stared at the screen in disbelief. They weren't even in Ohio anymore. They had already left the state. And somehow Travis was still trying to access my accounts. A wave of cold terror swept through me. This wasn't panic-driven behavior anymore. It was organized, planned, intentional. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider something truly horrifying. What if the cruel text message had never been about family rejection at all? What if it was designed to isolate me, to keep me emotionally devastated, while financial fraud happened quietly in the background? I suddenly remembered how helpless I'd felt after reading those words, how humiliated, how ashamed. I'd spent days blaming myself instead of asking practical questions. And maybe that was exactly what Travis wanted. The realization made my skin crawl. When I got home, I immediately checked my filing cabinet again. This time, I noticed something else missing. A photocopy of my driver's license. Gone. I sat down slowly on the floor beside the open cabinet. Then I started crying. Not loud crying, the exhausted kind. The kind that comes when fear and heartbreak finally become too heavy to carry simultaneously. I cried for my daughter, for Emma, for Daniel, who would have known exactly what to do, and for myself. Because at 67 years old, after a lifetime of believing family meant safety, I was beginning to realize someone inside my own family may have viewed me as a target. 2 days after the bank meeting, I finally admitted something to myself that I had avoided my entire life. I needed help, not emotional help, legal help. The realization tasted bitter in my mouth. I grew up in a generation that handled problems privately. You didn't involve lawyers in family matters unless things became truly catastrophic. And maybe that was exactly why women like me became vulnerable, because we kept protecting family members long after they stopped protecting us. The bank manager had given me the name of an attorney who specialized in elder financial abuse cases. Just hearing those words made me feel sick. Elder financial abuse. It sounded like something that happened to confused people in nursing homes. Not me, not Casey Long, retired librarian homeowner, tax-paying grandmother who still balanced her checkbook by hand every month. But the forged paperwork sitting inside my purse told a different story. By Thursday morning, I forced myself to drive downtown to Rebecca Hayes' office. The building was modern and cold-looking, all glass windows and polished steel. I nearly turned around twice before walking inside. Part of me still wanted this entire nightmare to be a misunderstanding, a terrible misunderstanding. Rebecca Hayes turned out to be younger than I expected, mid-40s maybe, sharp navy suit, dark curly hair pulled into a low knot, intelligent eyes that missed absolutely nothing. But what surprised me most was how kind her voice sounded. "Mrs. Long," she said, warmly shaking my hand, "please come in." Her office overlooked the snowy streets of Columbus. Law books lined one wall, and a small framed quote sat behind her desk. "When people show you who they are, believe them." I hated how deeply those words unsettled me. Rebecca motioned for me to sit. "What can I help you with today?" The question nearly broke me, because suddenly I didn't know where to begin. With the text message, the disappearance, the forged paperwork, the possibility my daughter was trapped in an abusive marriage, I ended up blurting everything out in tangled emotional pieces. Rebecca listened without interrupting once, not once. That alone made tears sting my eyes. Most people interrupt older women constantly. They correct us, rush us, dismiss us. But Rebecca sat quietly taking notes while I unraveled the worst weeks of my life. When I finished speaking, the office fell silent for several moments. Then Rebecca asked softly, "Do you believe your daughter willingly cut contact with you?" I opened my mouth automatically to say yes, but the answer wouldn't come out. Instead, I whispered, "I don't know anymore." Rebecca nodded slowly. "That uncertainty matters." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She folded her hands carefully. "Mrs. Long, what you're describing contains multiple indicators of coercive control and targeted financial exploitation. Again, with those terms. Clinical, precise, terrifying." I stared at her. You really think Travis planned this? Rebecca's expression sharpened slightly. I think the financial behavior was deliberate, yes. She asked to review the bank paperwork. As she studied the forged documents, something about her demeanor changed subtly. More focused, more alert. Finally, she tapped one page with her finger. This signature doesn't match naturally. My heart pounded. So it's fake? In my opinion, yes. Relief crashed through me, so suddenly I almost cried. Not because the situation improved, but because somebody else finally saw what I saw. I wasn't imagining things. Rebecca continued examining the pages. Then she suddenly frowned. This is interesting. What? She slid the paper toward me. Look here. At first, I didn't understand what she meant. Then I noticed it. One of the witness signatures attached to the authorization forms appeared to be Maddie's, but something looked strange about it. Rebecca pointed carefully. The handwriting pressure changes midway through the signature. I blinked at her. I don't understand. She leaned back slightly. It may indicate hesitation, coercion, or tracing. My stomach tightened painfully. You mean Travis forced her? I can't prove that yet, Rebecca said carefully. But I can say this doesn't look like a confident, voluntary signature. The room suddenly felt smaller. I thought about Maddie sitting somewhere frightened while signing documents she barely understood. Or worse, documents she was forced to sign. A terrible wave of guilt hit me again. I should have seen this sooner, I whispered. Rebecca's expression softened immediately. Mrs. Long, I need you to hear something clearly. I looked up. Intelligent women get manipulated every day, especially compassionate women. Tears instantly filled my eyes, because compassion had always been the center of my identity. Motherhood, marriage, teaching children, helping family. I spent my entire life believing kindness protected people. Now I was beginning to understand kindness without boundaries could become dangerous. Rebecca continued gently. Predatory people often target emotionally generous individuals because generosity creates trust. I looked down at my hands. So I caused this. No, she said firmly. You trusted family. That's not a crime. The words hit me harder than I expected. For days I had been punishing myself internally. You were naive, weak, foolish. But Rebecca's calm certainty interrupted that spiral for the first time. She asked several more practical questions after that. Did Travis know my passwords? Did he ever access my home alone? Did Maddie seem fearful recently? Had I updated my will? That last question made me hesitate. Yes, I admitted quietly. After Daniel died. And who knew about the contents? Only family. Rebecca made another note. Then she looked at me directly. Mrs. Long, has Travis ever suggested you seem forgetful, emotional, or unstable? A cold chill spread through me instantly. Actually, yes. There had been comments over the years. Little jokes, mostly. Casey forgets everything these days. Careful, she's getting senile. She cries at dog food commercials now. At the time, everyone laughed, including me. But suddenly, those jokes looked different, strategic, like tiny seeds planted over time. Oh my God, I whispered. Rebecca's face grew grave. It's possible he was slowly building a narrative that you were emotionally compromised, vulnerable, unstable. I physically recoiled in my chair. The humiliation burned through me like acid, not just because Travis may have manipulated finances, but because he may have been quietly reshaping how others perceived me. Older women already become invisible enough in this world. The idea of being painted as mentally unstable terrified me deeply. Rebecca leaned forward slightly. Listen to me carefully. From this point forward, you need to stop thinking like a guilty mother. I stared at her. You need to start thinking like a witness. The sentence landed heavily between us. Because she was right. For weeks I had approached everything emotionally. What did I do wrong? How do I fix my family? Why doesn't my daughter love me? But Rebecca was asking different questions entirely. Who benefits financially? Who created isolation? Who forged documents? Who controls communication? For the first time, the situation began shifting inside my mind. This might not simply be a family tragedy. It might be a crime. Before I left, Rebecca handed me her card and gave very specific instructions. Freeze all major accounts. Change passwords immediately. Document every interaction. Do not contact Travis again directly. And most importantly, if your daughter reaches out, preserve every message. I nodded numbly. Then, just as I reached the office door, Rebecca said something that stopped me cold. "Mrs. Long." I turned. I think there's a strong possibility Travis isn't finished yet. Fear crept instantly back into my chest. "What do you mean?" Rebecca's eyes remained steady on mine. "I think he may be preparing to make you look unstable legally." The room suddenly felt ice cold, because deep down, I knew she was probably right. For almost a week after meeting Rebecca Hayes, my life became consumed by paperwork, passwords, and fear. Every morning began with anxiety before my eyes even opened. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the old heater rattling through the house, wondering where my daughter was sleeping, wondering whether Emma was safe, wondering if Travis was still trying to access my accounts while I slept. Rebecca checked in with me almost daily. That alone kept me functioning. She spoke calmly, logically, professionally, like someone holding a flashlight while I stumbled through darkness. But emotionally, I was unraveling. The hardest part wasn't the fraud. It wasn't even the disappearance. It was uncertainty, not knowing whether Maddie was willingly abandoning me or silently trapped somewhere beyond my reach. That uncertainty poisoned every hour. One snowy afternoon, I decided to organize old electronics and paperwork in the upstairs guest room, mostly to distract myself from panic. The room had slowly become a storage space over the years. Old boxes, Christmas decorations, photo albums, unused lamps. Life accumulates quietly when you stay in one home long enough. I dragged several dusty containers across the carpet and began sorting through them mechanically. Old tax forms, expired warranties, Daniel's tools, half-empty greeting card boxes. Then I found an old phone charger tangled beneath a stack of magazines. Immediately I remembered something. Months earlier, Maddie had borrowed one of my old backup phones temporarily after hers stopped working. I froze, because I suddenly realized, when she returned the phone, I never checked whether everything had been deleted. My pulse quickened. I hurried downstairs, opened the junk drawer in the kitchen, and after several frantic minutes, finally found the old phone wrapped in a grocery bag. The battery was dead. While it charged, I paced my kitchen nervously. I don't know why I felt so anxious exactly. Maybe instinct, maybe hope, maybe fear of discovering something terrible. When the screen finally lit up, I almost cried from the sight of Maddie's old lock screen photo, Emma smiling at the zoo. A normal family moment from before everything collapsed. I unlocked the device slowly. Most of the apps had been cleared, messages deleted, photos removed, but not everything. A voicemail notification still remained buried inside the system. One unheard message. My breathing stopped. The voicemail was dated almost 3 weeks before the text message that ended our relationship. Hands trembling violently, I pressed play. At first, all I heard was static. Then Maddie's voice, soft, shaking. "Mom." My heart cracked instantly. She sounded terrified. Not angry, not cold, terrified. "Mom, I don't know if—" A loud noise interrupted her suddenly, like something hitting a wall. Maddie inhaled sharply. Then her voice dropped into a whisper so quiet I almost couldn't hear it. "If something happens—" My entire body went cold. In the background, Travis's voice suddenly exploded through the speaker. "Who are you talking to?" I physically flinched. Maddie gasped, then hurried, whispering, "I have to go." Another loud crash. Then the line disconnected abruptly. Silence. I sat frozen at the kitchen table, staring at the phone in complete horror. The voicemail lasted less than 20 seconds, but it changed everything. Because now I knew, with absolute certainty, my daughter had tried to reach me before she disappeared, and she was afraid. I replayed the voicemail 6 times in a row. Every replay revealed something worse. The panic in Maddie's breathing, the fear in her whisper, the violence buried beneath Travis's voice. My stomach churned so violently I thought I might vomit. How long had this been happening? How much had Emma witnessed, and why hadn't I pushed harder when my instincts first warned me I started crying so hard I could barely hold the phone? Not delicate tears, broken tears, the kind pulled from somewhere ancient inside a mother's body. I immediately called Rebecca. The second she answered, I said I found something. 20 minutes later, I sat in Rebecca's office while she listened to the voicemail carefully through headphones. The room remained silent after it ended. Finally, Rebecca removed the headphones slowly. That's extremely concerning. Concerning. The lawyer's version of horrifying. I wiped my eyes shakily. She was scared. Yes, Rebecca said carefully. She was. I stared at her desperately. You believe me now, right? You believe Maddie didn't want this. Rebecca's expression softened. I already believed coercion was possible, but this voicemail strengthens that concern significantly. Concern. Possible. Legal language again. But beneath her careful wording, I could see alarm in her eyes now, too. Rebecca asked permission to preserve a copy of the voicemail as evidence. Evidence. Hearing my daughter's frightened voice described that way nearly shattered me all over again. Still, I agreed, because now this wasn't only emotional anymore, it was dangerous. Rebecca leaned back in her chair thoughtfully. Mrs. Long, has your daughter ever shown signs of physical injury? I thought carefully. Bruises, no. At least none I remembered clearly. But then another memory surfaced. Last spring, during Emma's school recital, Maddie wore long sleeves despite warm weather. At one point, her sleeve slipped slightly while clapping. I remembered seeing dark discoloration near her wrist. When I asked about it, she immediately covered it and laughed nervously. Kitchen accident. Kitchen accident. I closed my eyes painfully. God, how many lies had I accepted because truth felt too frightening? Rebecca interrupted my thoughts gently. Coercive control doesn't always involve physical violence, but emotional intimidation alone can create severe fear responses. I nodded numbly. Then I whispered the question haunting me most. What if I'm too late? Rebecca didn't answer immediately, and somehow that silence terrified me more than words would have. Finally, she said, "We don't know that yet." Not comforting, but honest. I appreciated honesty now more than comfort, because comfort had blinded me for years. Before leaving her office, Rebecca advised me not to contact Travis or Maddie again for the moment. That voicemail may indicate surveillance or monitoring, she explained. If Travis feels threatened, he could relocate again. Relocate again. The words made my chest tighten. He already took them once. What if next time they disappeared forever? That night, I sat alone in my living room, replaying the voicemail over and over. Sometimes I focused on Maddie's fear, sometimes on Travis's voice. But eventually I noticed something else, a sound in the background beneath the chaos. A television. Faint, almost impossible to hear. I increased the volume carefully. Commercial music played briefly before a local weather report interrupted. Heavy storms moving through eastern Tennessee tonight. I sat upright instantly. Tennessee. Rebecca had already suspected they fled there because of the banking login attempt. Now the voicemail confirmed it indirectly. They had likely already been planning the move weeks earlier. I called Rebecca immediately, despite the late hour. When I explained what I heard, her voice sharpened with renewed focus. That's important. For the first time in weeks, something flickered inside me besides grief. Determination. Because my daughter hadn't abandoned me. She had tried to reach me. And somewhere out there beneath Travis's control and fear and silence, Maddie might still be waiting for someone to finally see the truth. 3 days after discovering the voicemail, Rebecca Hayes introduced me to a private investigator named Daniel Brooks. At first, I resisted the idea completely. Hiring a private investigator sounded dramatic, extreme, like something wealthy people did in television shows, not grieving grandmothers from Ohio. But Rebecca's voice remained calm and firm. Mrs. Long. If Travis is moving frequently and controlling communication, we need professional help locating them safely. Safely. That word mattered now, because for the first time I truly believed Maddie and Emma might be in danger. Daniel Brooks met us in Rebecca's office on a gray Monday morning while snow drifted steadily outside the windows. He looked to be in his early 50s, with weathered features and tired eyes that somehow made him seem trustworthy immediately. Not flashy, not intimidating, just observant, very observant. He shook my hand gently. "I'm sorry for what you're going through, Mrs. Long." The kindness in his tone nearly made me cry again. I was exhausted from crying, exhausted from fear, exhausted from replaying years of memories searching for clues I should have noticed sooner. Daniel sat across from me with a legal pad and asked careful questions. Dates, addresses, financial information, vehicle descriptions, patterns in Travis's behavior. When he asked whether Travis had family in Tennessee, I suddenly remembered something. "His cousin lives outside Nashville," I said slowly. Daniel immediately looked up. "That's important." Rebecca nodded beside him. The bank login attempt also originated from Tennessee. Daniel wrote something quickly. Then he asked another question that chilled me unexpectedly. "Did your granddaughter seem frightened of her father?" I hesitated, because admitting the answer out loud felt unbearable. Finally, quietly, I said, "Yes." The room fell silent. I stared down at my hands while guilt crawled through my chest again. "I thought he was just strict," I whispered weakly. Daniel's expression remained gentle. Abusive people often normalize fear inside families, especially around children. Normalize fear. The phrase haunted me instantly. Because he was right. How many tense dinners had I sat through pretending everything was normal? How many times had Emma gone silent the second Travis entered a room? I remembered one particular afternoon vividly. Emma was helping me plant flowers in the backyard while Maddie sat nearby, reading. It was peaceful, warm, easy. Then Travis's truck pulled into the driveway unexpectedly. Emma immediately stopped talking. Not gradually. Instantly. The little girl physically stiffened. At the time, I interpreted it as normal childhood behavior. Now the memory made me sick. Daniel continued gathering details for nearly an hour before finally leaning back thoughtfully. "I think there's a good chance they're somewhere in Tennessee temporarily," he said. My pulse quickened. "Can you find them?" "Possibly." But Travis appears careful. Careful. Not desperate, not chaotic, organized. That frightened me more. Daniel explained how difficult it could be locating people who deliberately moved frequently, especially if they used temporary rentals or avoided stable employment records. Then he said something that tightened every muscle in my body. If Travis suspects legal action, he may relocate again quickly. I imagined Maddie and Emma being dragged from place to place while Travis spiraled deeper into paranoia and control. The thought made me physically nauseous. Over the next week, my life became divided into two parts: waiting and remembering. Waiting for updates from Daniel, remembering all the signs I missed. I barely touched food anymore. Sleep came in fragments. Sometimes I woke up convinced I heard Emma laughing downstairs before remembering my house was empty. One evening, I wandered into the guest bedroom and found one of Emma's old stuffed animals tucked beneath the bed. A faded brown rabbit with one crooked ear. I sat on the floor clutching it while grief swallowed me whole. I kept imagining Emma frightened, somewhere unfamiliar. Did she still have her favorite blanket? Was she eating properly? Did Maddie still braid her hair before school? Or had school stopped entirely? That fear became horrifyingly real 2 days later. Daniel called just after noon. "Mrs. Long," he said carefully, "I found something concerning." My heart immediately started racing. "What is it?" I contacted the Columbus School District quietly this morning. I gripped the kitchen counter, and Emma was officially withdrawn from school 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks, right around the time of the voicemail. What reason did they give? Daniel paused. Homeschooling transition. I closed my eyes in horror. Emma loved school, loved it. Science fairs, dance club, reading competitions. The idea of her suddenly isolated somewhere with no teachers, no friends, no stability, it terrified me. "Can they do that legally?" I whispered. "Yes," Daniel said gently. "Parents can withdraw children." Parents. The word felt complicated now, because technically Travis was her parent too. But fathers are supposed to protect children, not isolate them. That night, I sat in Emma's old bedroom after dark, remembering happier years. The room still contained traces of her childhood visits, coloring books, hair ribbons, tiny socks left behind accidentally. I picked up an old framed photo from her 10th birthday party. Emma grinned brightly while holding cake frosting on her nose. Maddie laughed beside her. But Travis. Even in the picture, he looked irritated, detached, like family joy annoyed him somehow. Another memory surfaced then, last Christmas. Emma wanted to stay overnight at my house after dinner like she always used to. Before Maddie could answer, Travis said sharply, "She's getting too old to cling to people. Cling to people." At the time, I laughed awkwardly and let it go. Now I understood something horrifying. Abusive people isolate gradually, not dramatically at first. They reduce safe spaces one by one until victims have nowhere emotionally secure left to run. And maybe that was exactly what Travis had done to Maddie. 3 days later, Daniel finally called with the first real breakthrough. I traced recent financial movement tied to Travis. I nearly dropped the phone. Where? Near Nashville. My chest tightened painfully. Tennessee. Yes. Hope surged through me so suddenly it almost hurt. Not hope that everything would magically be okay, but hope that they were real again, reachable, not vanished entirely. Daniel explained carefully that Travis appeared to be using short-term rental properties under slightly altered names, fake middle initials, temporary prepaid accounts, minimal paper trails. "He's trying not to be found," Daniel said grimly. "Why?" I whispered. Neither of us answered the question, because we both already knew. That evening I stood outside in my backyard while snow fell silently across the garden. The cold air burned my lungs, but I barely noticed. For weeks I had lived inside confusion. Now things were becoming clearer, dangerously clear. My daughter didn't disappear because she stopped loving me. She disappeared because someone was controlling her life. And somewhere near Nashville, my granddaughter was trapped inside that same nightmare too. I looked up into the dark winter sky and whispered softly, "Hold on, baby girl." Because for the first time since that terrible text message arrived, I truly believed I might still be able to bring them home. The email arrived at 2:13 in the morning. I know the exact time because I was awake already. Sleep had become impossible by then. Most nights I drifted between exhaustion and panic, lying in bed listening to the house creak around me while imagining worst-case scenarios I couldn't stop. That night, freezing rain tapped against the windows while I sat wrapped in a blanket on the living room couch pretending to watch television. My laptop rested open beside me, mostly because I kept refreshing my email obsessively, hoping, begging silently for some sign from Maddie. Instead, I saw a new message appear from an unfamiliar address. The subject line simply read, "Nana Casey." My entire body froze. For several seconds, I couldn't move. Then I opened it. Inside was only one sentence. "It's Emma. Please don't tell Dad." I burst into tears instantly. Not graceful tears. Violent, shaking sobs that bent me forward on the couch, while relief and terror crashed together inside my chest. Emma was alive. Emma was reaching for me. My hands shook so badly I almost couldn't type my reply. "Sweetheart, are you okay? Where's your mom?" I stared at the screen, desperately waiting. 3 minutes passed. Then another message appeared. "Mom cries every night." My heart shattered. Another message followed quickly after. "Dad took our phones. Then, he checks everything." I pressed my hand against my mouth, trying not to cry too loudly, even though nobody else was in the house. The image of Emma secretly typing, while frightened of being caught, nearly destroyed me. I wrote back carefully. "Are you safe?" A long pause. Then I don't know. God. I closed my eyes tightly. No child should ever have to write those words. I forced myself to stay calm. "Where are you, sweetheart?" Several minutes passed this time. I imagined Emma hiding somewhere with a borrowed device or stolen moment of privacy while Travis slept nearby. Finally, another message appeared. "Near Nashville. Dad says we might move again. My stomach twisted violently. Move again. Daniel had been right. Travis was still relocating them constantly. I typed carefully. Can you tell me anything nearby? A street store? Anything. No response came for almost 10 minutes. I thought maybe she'd been caught. Every second felt unbearable. Then suddenly, there's a big water tower near us. Another message, and a diner with a guitar sign. I immediately took screenshots and forwarded everything to Rebecca and Daniel. Within 2 minutes, Rebecca called me. Do not respond emotionally right now, she warned immediately. I wiped tears from my face. She's scared, Rebecca, I know. But we need to protect communication. Travis may monitor devices. Her voice remained calm, focused, professional. I clung to that calmness desperately. What do I say to her? Keep responses short, reassuring. No plans yet. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Then Rebecca said something that chilled me. If Travis discovers this communication, he may disappear with them again immediately. The thought made my blood run cold. I returned to the email carefully. I love you so much. I'm here. You did the right thing. Emma replied, almost instantly this time. Mom misses you. The words hit me harder than anything else, because despite everything, despite the cruel text, despite the silence, despite the disappearance, Maddie still missed me. I started crying again quietly. Then another message appeared. Dad says you ruined everything. I stared at the screen for a long time. That sentence explained so much. Abusive people survive by rewriting reality. And somehow Travis had spent years convincing my daughter and maybe even Emma that I was the problem. I typed slowly. None of this is your fault, not yours or your mom's. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, Dad gets mad when Mom talks about you. My chest tightened painfully. I suddenly remembered all the interrupted phone calls, the nervous glances, the shortened visits. Maddie hadn't been drifting away naturally. She'd been controlled away from me. The realization brought both relief and unbearable guilt simultaneously. I should have seen it sooner. Then Emma sent another message that truly terrified me. Dad says if Mom leaves him, we'll have nothing. Classic control, financial fear, isolation. Rebecca had explained all of it, but hearing it through a frightened 12-year-old child felt unbearable. I carefully asked, Is your mom with you right now? No. She's asleep. Is she hurt? A very long pause followed. Then finally, Not tonight. Not tonight. My entire body went cold. Not tonight. Meaning there were nights when she was hurt. I physically stood up from the couch, adrenaline flooding through me. I wanted to drive to Tennessee immediately. I wanted to kick down doors. I wanted to drag my daughter and granddaughter out of whatever nightmare Travis created. But emotion without strategy could destroy everything now. Rebecca kept reminding me of that. One wrong move and Travis could vanish permanently. So instead I forced myself to stay composed for Emma. I typed, You are very brave. I need you to stay safe and delete these messages after reading them. Emma replied, Okay. Then one final message arrived. Nana Casey. Yes, sweetheart. I was scared you stopped loving us. I broke completely. I sank onto the couch, clutching the laptop against my chest while sobs ripped through me. Because somewhere inside all this fear and manipulation, my granddaughter truly believed I might have abandoned them too. I typed through blurred vision. Never, never, ever. No response came afterward. The account went offline. And suddenly, the silence felt enormous again. By sunrise, Rebecca and Daniel were already working on Emma's clues. The diner with the guitar sign, the water tower, possible rental areas outside Nashville. Daniel believed narrowing the search radius was finally possible, but Rebecca warned me repeatedly. We still need to move carefully. Careful. Everything required carefulness now. That afternoon, exhaustion finally caught up with me. I fell asleep briefly in my recliner and dreamed about Maddie as a little girl. She couldn't have been older than 6 in the dream. She stood in my kitchen wearing yellow rain boots, holding my hand tightly while asking if monsters were real. I remembered exactly what I told her back then. Sometimes they are, I'd said gently. But monsters hate being seen clearly. When I woke up, tears covered my face. Because now I understood something painful. Travis survived all these years because nobody fully saw him clearly, not even me. But that was changing now, slowly, painfully, irreversibly. That evening, Daniel finally called, with cautious optimism in his voice. "I think we're getting close." My heart immediately started pounding. How close? We identified several possible rental properties matching Emma's clues. I gripped the phone tightly. And Maddie. "We don't know yet," he admitted carefully. "But I believe they're still there. Still there. Still reachable. Still alive." Hope flooded through me so powerfully, it almost frightened me, because hope is dangerous when you've already lost so much. But for the first time since that horrible midnight text message destroyed my life, I no longer felt powerless. Emma had found a way to reach me, and somewhere beyond the fear, the silence, and Travis's control, my family was finally reaching back. Hope can disappear faster than fear. I learned that 3 days after Emma's email. I was standing in my kitchen making toast I had no intention of eating when someone knocked sharply at my front door. Not a friendly knock, official, controlled. My stomach tightened instantly. When I opened the door, a uniformed police officer stood on my porch beside a woman holding a clipboard. For one terrifying second, I thought something had happened to Maddie or Emma. "Mrs. Casey Long," the woman asked politely. "Yes. I'm Denise Carter with Franklin County Adult Services." The world tilted slightly beneath me. Adult Services. Behind her, the police officer shifted awkwardly. "We received concerns regarding repeated attempts to contact family members who requested no communication." I stared at her in disbelief. "What?" Denise glanced at her paperwork carefully. "There are allegations that you've been engaging in emotionally unstable behavior, repeated harassment, and attempts to track relatives who have expressed fear for their safety." I physically stepped backward. Fear for their safety. The words echoed inside my skull like explosions. "No," I whispered. "No, that's not true." Denise's tone remained professional, but cautious. "Mrs. Long, we're simply required to conduct a welfare assessment." Welfare assessment. My knees almost gave out. Rebecca had warned me. Travis was building a case, and now it was happening. I invited them inside because refusing would only make me appear suspicious, but humiliation burned through me so fiercely I could barely think straight. My own living room suddenly felt unfamiliar, while strangers quietly evaluated whether I seemed mentally unstable. I hated every second of it. Denise asked routine questions. Was I eating properly? Sleeping. Did I often feel confused or emotional? I answered carefully while fighting tears, because how does a grieving mother explain herself without sounding emotionally unstable, especially after weeks of crying panic and obsession over missing family members? At one point, Denise glanced toward framed photos of Maddie and Emma on my mantel. "You've been trying to locate them." "Yes," I said immediately, "because I believe my daughter may be in danger." The police officer and Denise exchanged a brief look. That look terrified me, because I recognized it. Polite doubt, the same doubt older women face constantly once emotion enters the room. Denise continued carefully. "The report states your daughter requested no further contact." I swallowed hard. My daughter didn't write that message willingly. "And how do you know that?" "Because I'm her mother." The answer rose inside me instantly. But I forced myself to remain calm, because I have evidence suggesting coercion and financial fraud. That changed the atmosphere slightly. I explained the forged paperwork carefully, the fraud attempt, the voicemail. Rebecca Hayes' involvement. Denise listened more seriously after that, still cautious, still guarded, but no longer dismissive. When they finally left nearly 40 minutes later, I closed the front door and immediately collapsed into tears. Not because I was weak, because I was furious. Furious that Travis had weaponized my age and grief against me. Furious that he understood exactly how easily older women could be portrayed as unstable once we became emotional. And most of all, furious that part of me still felt ashamed. That afternoon, I called Rebecca immediately. "He reported me," I said the second she answered. "I know," I blinked. "What?" He filed formal harassment concerns yesterday. Cold fear spread through me instantly. Rebecca's voice remained controlled. He's claiming you're emotionally deteriorating after becoming obsessed with regaining contact. Obsessed. The word felt cruelly strategic. She's my daughter, I whispered brokenly. I know, Rebecca said gently, but this is exactly how coercive controllers operate. They isolate victims while discrediting anyone who threatens control. I sat heavily at the kitchen table. He's trying to make me look crazy. Yes, Rebecca said quietly. He is. Hearing someone confirm it so plainly sent a chill through my entire body. Rebecca instructed me to document everything immediately. Every call, every visit, every communication from Emma, every piece of financial evidence. We fight facts with facts, she said firmly. I nodded slowly, even though she couldn't see me. Then she added something that terrified me further. Travis may escalate now. Escalate. How? If he realizes we're getting closer to locating them, he may become more desperate. After the call ended, I sat alone in silence for a long time. Outside, snow melted slowly beneath gray February rain. Water dripped steadily from the gutters, while my house felt emptier than ever. I suddenly remembered something Maddie once told me after Daniel died. Grief makes you feel invisible and exposed at the same time. Back then, I barely understood what she meant. Now I did. I felt painfully visible to judgment and completely invisible in my suffering. That evening, I tried distracting myself by folding laundry while television noise filled the background. But halfway through sorting towels, my phone buzzed with a new message from Daniel Brooks. Need to speak tonight. Important. My pulse quickened instantly. I called him immediately. What happened? Daniel sounded serious. We found another rental linked to Travis. Hope flickered inside me. Did you see them? No, he admitted, but neighbors confirmed a couple matching. Travis and Maddie stayed there briefly. Briefly. They already left. Possibly. My stomach sank. Then Daniel continued. One neighbor mentioned frequent shouting. I closed my eyes painfully, and the little girl. A pause. She seemed frightened. Fear tightened around my chest like wire. Daniel explained that Travis appeared increasingly paranoid. Multiple short-term rentals, cash-heavy payments, minimal interaction with neighbors. He's moving like someone trying not to leave a trail, Daniel said grimly. I thought immediately of Emma secretly emailing me while terrified of being caught. And suddenly another horrible realization struck me. What if Travis already suspected somebody was helping them? That night I barely slept again. Around midnight, I wandered downstairs and stood in the dark kitchen drinking water while memories kept crashing through me relentlessly. One memory in particular haunted me deeply. About 2 years earlier, Maddie and Travis came over after an argument. I knew they'd been fighting because Maddie's eyes were swollen from crying. While she showered upstairs, Travis sat in my kitchen drinking coffee. Out of nowhere, he said, "You know people always believe mothers automatically, even when they shouldn't." The statement felt strange at the time. I remember laughing awkwardly. What does that mean? He smiled slightly. Nothing. Just saying family stories usually have two sides. At the time, it sounded meaningless. Now it sounded like a warning. Like he had been preparing narratives long before anyone realized danger existed. The next morning brought another blow. Rebecca called before 9. "There's more," she said carefully. My stomach tightened instantly. "What now?" Travis filed additional statements this morning, claiming you've attempted to interfere with parental authority. I stared out my kitchen window numbly. He's trying to bury me. Rebecca's voice hardened slightly. He's trying to isolate Maddie further by destroying your credibility. Tears filled my eyes again. I just want my daughter safe. I know. Then Rebecca said something that changed everything. "Mrs. Long, we may need to move faster than planned." My heartbeat quickened. Why? Because if Travis believes legal scrutiny is increasing, he may flee completely. The room suddenly felt airless. Flee completely. Disappear forever. Take Maddie and Emma, somewhere unreachable. I gripped the counter tightly. So what do we do? There was a brief pause. Then Rebecca answered quietly. We prepare to confront him. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I realized the moment I feared most was finally approaching. I had imagined the moment I would see my daughter again hundreds of times. In every version inside my head, Maddie ran toward me crying, or collapsed into my arms, or whispered, "Mom, I'm sorry." I never imagined she would look at me like a stranger. We drove to Tennessee before sunrise on a freezing Thursday morning. Rebecca insisted I shouldn't go alone. Daniel drove separately behind us while Rebecca sat beside me, reviewing folders filled with financial records, fraud documents, screenshots, and printed copies of Emma's emails. Evidence. My family had become evidence. The thought hollowed me out inside. The drive from Ohio to Tennessee felt endless. My stomach churned the entire way. Every mile south tightened the pressure in my chest. By the time we reached the outskirts of Nashville, rain had begun falling steadily across the highway. Gray skies, gray buildings, gray fear. Daniel finally called around noon. I found them. My pulse exploded instantly. Where? A rental property outside Murfreesboro. I gripped the phone so tightly my fingers hurt. Are they there now? Yes. Travis's truck is parked outside. For a second, I couldn't breathe. They were real, close, only minutes away. Rebecca placed a hand gently on my arm. Remember, she said carefully, we stay calm. No sudden emotional escalation. I nodded automatically, even though calmness no longer existed anywhere inside me. The rental house sat at the end of a narrow gravel road surrounded by bare winter trees. Small, faded beige siding. Cheap temporary furniture visible through thin curtains. Nothing about it looked like a home, more like a hiding place. Rain tapped softly against the windshield while we parked several houses away. My entire body trembled violently. What if she won't see me? I whispered. Rebecca looked at me steadily. Then we keep trying. Daniel watched the house through binoculars quietly. Then suddenly he lowered them. I see Emma. My heart nearly stopped. I grabbed the binoculars from him with shaking hands. And there she was, my granddaughter. Standing near the front window, wearing an oversized gray sweatshirt, she looked thinner, paler, older somehow, not physically older, emotionally older. Children forced to live inside fear age differently. Tears immediately blurred my vision. She's okay, I whispered desperately. But even as I said it, I knew she wasn't okay at all. Then another figure appeared behind her. Maddie. The moment I saw my daughter again, something inside me shattered completely. She looked exhausted. Her hair hung limp around her face. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her shoulders curved inward protectively, like someone permanently bracing for impact. She no longer looked like herself. She looked erased. I reached for the car door instinctively. Rebecca caught my arm gently, slowly, but I couldn't move slowly anymore. Not after months of fear. Not after hearing her terrified voicemail, not after Emma's emails. I stepped out into the cold rain before anyone could stop me. The gravel crunched loudly beneath my shoes as I walked toward the house. At first, nobody noticed me. Then Emma looked outside. Her eyes widened instantly. "Nana Casey," I heard her scream through the closed window. Everything inside the house suddenly erupted into movement. Maddie turned sharply toward the door. For one suspended moment, our eyes met through the rain-streaked glass. I expected relief. Instead, I saw pure panic. The front door opened violently. Emma rushed toward me first. I dropped to my knees and wrapped my arms around her, so tightly we both nearly collapsed onto the wet gravel. "Oh my God," I cried. "Oh, sweetheart." Emma sobbed against my shoulder. Behind her, Maddie stood frozen in the doorway, trembling visibly. "Mom." Her voice sounded broken. I stood slowly. Rain soaked through my coat while we stared at each other across only a few feet. That somehow felt like years. Then suddenly Maddie shook her head frantically. "You shouldn't be here." The words hit me like a slap. "What?" Fear flooded her face instantly. "You need to leave, Maddie." "Please," she whispered. "Please just go." I stared at her in disbelief. Not anger, terror. My daughter looked terrified. "Sweetheart," I said softly, stepping closer. "I know about the voicemail." Her face lost all color. "What I know you tried to call me." Tears instantly filled her eyes. Behind us, Rebecca and Daniel approached carefully but kept distance. Maddie looked toward them nervously, then back at me. You don't understand, she whispered. Then help me understand. Her lower lip trembled violently. For one brief second, I thought she might finally run into my arms. Then another voice exploded behind her. What the hell is this, Travis? Every muscle in my body tightened instantly. He stormed onto the porch wearing jeans and a dark jacket, his expression twisting with fury the second he saw me. You followed us. Emma flinched visibly beside me. That single reaction told me everything. Travis pointed toward the road aggressively. You need to leave right now. Rebecca stepped forward calmly. Mr. Cole, my name is Rebecca Hayes. I don't care who you are, he snapped. Then he turned directly toward me. You're harassing my family. Family. The word sounded grotesque coming from him. Maddie kept staring at the ground silently. That hurt almost more than anything else. Mom, she whispered weakly without looking at me. Please go. I felt my heart crack open again, but Rebecca remained calm. We have evidence of financial fraud and coercive control, she said evenly. For the first time, real fear flickered across Travis's face. Only briefly. Then it vanished behind anger. You're insane, he barked. All of you. There it was again. Insane. Crazy. Unstable. The narrative he kept building around me. I opened my mouth to speak when suddenly Emma stepped forward, and what happened next changed everything. Dad, stop lying. The scream ripped through the rain like shattered glass. Everyone froze. Emma stood shaking violently beside me, tears streaming down her face. You told Mom Nana Casey didn't love us anymore, she cried. You took her phone. You made her scared all the time. Emma Travis snapped sharply. But she didn't stop. You said if Mom left you, we'd lose everything. The silence afterward felt enormous. Maddie suddenly burst into tears. Real tears. Not controlled. Not hidden. Years of pain pouring out all at once. Travis looked around wildly like someone losing control of a collapsing performance. Maddie, he snapped. Tell them. But Maddie couldn't even look at him anymore. Instead, she looked at me. And in that moment, I finally saw my daughter clearly again beneath all the fear. I didn't send that text, she whispered. My knees nearly gave out beneath me. Rain fell steadily around us while the entire world seemed to stop moving. What I breathed. Maddie covered her mouth, sobbing. I didn't send it, Mom. And suddenly, every terrible piece of this nightmare finally began falling into place. For several seconds after Maddie admitted she hadn't sent the text message, nobody moved. Rain continued falling softly around us, while the entire world seemed suspended between truth and collapse. Then Travis laughed. Actually laughed. Not naturally. Desperately. You're really doing this, he snapped at Maddie. After everything, Maddie physically flinched. That tiny movement enraged me more than anything else. Because even now, even standing there exposed, Travis still held power over her fear. Rebecca stepped forward immediately. Mr. Cole, I strongly suggest you stop speaking. But Travis ignored her completely. She's unstable, he barked, pointing toward me. You know that, Maddie. My daughter looked down at the wet gravel silently, and suddenly I understood something devastating. This wasn't one moment of manipulation. This had been years, years of conditioning, years of fear, years of having her reality rewritten by someone who needed control more than love. Emma moved closer beside me and grabbed my hand tightly. I hate him, she whispered through tears. I squeezed her fingers gently. But before I could answer, Maddie suddenly spoke again. He sent it while I was asleep. The words came out shaking. Travis's expression changed instantly. Maddie. Warning. Sharp. Dangerous. But something inside my daughter had finally cracked open. Maybe Emma screaming the truth broke the illusion. Maybe seeing me standing there in the rain shattered the isolation Travis built around her. Or maybe Maddie was simply exhausted from surviving. I woke up and my phone was gone, she whispered. Then he told me you hated us. I felt physically sick. All those weeks. All that grief. All those nights I blamed myself. And Travis had engineered it deliberately. Rebecca spoke carefully. Maddie, did Travis control access to your devices? Maddie nodded slowly. Yes. Finances. Another nod. Yes. Communication with family. Maddie's face crumpled completely. Yes. Travis exploded suddenly. "Oh, come on! You're acting like some abused prisoner now." Emma jumped violently beside me. That reaction told its own story. Children don't fear ordinary anger like that. They fear practiced anger, predictable anger, the kind they've learned can become dangerous. Daniel quietly stepped between Travis and the rest of us. Not aggressively, just enough. Travis noticed immediately. His eyes narrowed. "You people have no idea what she's really like," he said bitterly, pointing at Maddie now. "She's emotional, irrational. She can't handle pressure." I closed my eyes briefly, because there it was again. The same tactic. Redefine the victim as unstable. Rebecca remained calm. "Mr. Cole, we have evidence of forged financial authorization documents." His jaw tightened visibly. "I don't know what she's talking about." Rebecca pulled a folder from her bag. "We also have bank fraud reports, witness statements, and voicemail recordings." For the first time, real panic flickered across Travis's face. Only for a second. But I saw it. Maddie saw it too. And something changed in her expression right then. Not strength exactly. Recognition. Like she was finally seeing him clearly too. She wiped rainwater and tears from her face shakily. "You told me Mom was trying to take Emma away from us." Travis stared at her. "She was interfering." "No," Maddie whispered. "You made me afraid of everyone." The silence afterward felt heavy enough to crush us all. Then slowly, painfully, the truth began pouring out. Not dramatically, not like movie confessions, more like someone bleeding emotionally after years of pressure. Travis controlled the bank accounts. He monitored Maddie's phone. He read her emails. He isolated her from friends gradually over the years. Every time she questioned him, he accused her of being unstable or selfish. Sometimes he disappeared with money for days and blamed stress afterward. Sometimes he punched walls. Sometimes he screamed for hours. And sometimes he apologized so convincingly she believed things would improve. That part hurt the most somehow, because abusive love survives through hope. Maddie looked at me with unbearable guilt in her eyes. "I should have told you." I stepped closer carefully. "Honey." "But I was scared," she whispered. "I thought if I left, he'd take Emma." Emma started crying again quietly beside me. Maddie looked toward her daughter and completely fell apart. "Oh, God," she sobbed. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." For the first time in months, I wrapped my arms around my daughter, and the second I touched her, she collapsed against me, trembling violently. Not elegant crying, not controlled. The kind of crying people do when survival mode finally ends. "I'm sorry, Mom," she kept repeating. "I'm sorry." I held her tightly despite my own tears. "You don't have to apologize for being afraid." But even while I said the words, grief tore through me, because fear had stolen years from both of us. Behind us, Travis suddenly shouted, "She's lying!" Daniel stepped forward instantly again. Rebecca's voice turned ice cold. "Enough!" Travis looked around wildly now, cornered, exposed, dangerous. I realized then that control was slipping away from him publicly for the first time. And men like Travis often become most frightening when they lose control. He pointed directly at me. "You caused this." The accusation hit me strangely, because months earlier I would have believed him. I would have folded inward with guilt automatically. But now I looked at my frightened granddaughter, my shattered daughter, the forged documents, the lies, the isolation. And suddenly something inside me hardened. "No," I said quietly. Travis blinked. I stepped forward slightly. "You did." Rain dripped steadily from the porch roof between us, and for the first time in my entire life I saw Travis without excuses protecting him, not misunderstood, not stressed, not difficult, abusive, predatory, manipulative. The clarity felt horrifying and liberating. Rebecca quietly informed Travis that legal proceedings regarding fraud and coercive financial abuse were already being prepared. He immediately demanded a lawyer. Then denied everything again. Then blamed stress. Then blamed Maddie. The cycle unfolded right in front of us exactly the way Rebecca predicted. Watching it happen in real time finally shattered any remaining doubt inside me. Eventually, local authorities arrived after Daniel contacted them earlier as precaution. Statements were taken carefully while tensions remained high. Emma refused to stand near her father. That alone spoke volumes. Maddie sat beside me, wrapped in a borrowed blanket while giving her statement shakily. At one point, she whispered, "I didn't know how to leave." I squeezed her hand tightly, because now I understood something painful about abuse. People outside the situation always ask, why didn't she leave sooner? But that's the wrong question. The real question is, how thoroughly was she taught to fear leaving? Hours later, after Travis was finally separated from us, pending investigation, the rain stopped completely. The silence afterward felt unreal. Maddie sat in the rental house living room, staring blankly at the floor, while Emma slept curled against my shoulder, for the first time in months without fear in her face. Rebecca quietly reviewed paperwork nearby. Daniel stepped outside to take calls, and for a while, none of us spoke. Finally, Maddie looked at me. "There's more?" she whispered weakly. My stomach tightened again. "What do you mean?" Tears filled her eyes. "The money." Rebecca looked up immediately. Maddie's voice shook violently. "He wasn't just stealing from you." A cold chill spread slowly through my body. Then Maddie whispered the sentence that revealed the full horror of what Travis had really been planning all along. "He wanted control of everything after putting you under guardianship." The hearing took place 6 weeks later in a Tennessee courtroom that smelled faintly of coffee-wet coats and old paper. By then, my life barely resembled the one I had before that midnight text message. Maddie and Emma were staying in a protected temporary apartment arranged through Rebecca's legal contacts. Travis was under investigation for fraud, identity theft, financial exploitation, and coercive control allegations. But despite all that, fear still followed us everywhere, especially Maddie. Trauma doesn't disappear the moment danger leaves the room. Sometimes the danger stays alive inside your nervous system long afterward. The morning of the hearing, Maddie stood in front of the bathroom mirror for almost 20 minutes, unable to stop shaking. "I can't do this," she whispered. I stood behind her quietly. "Yes, you can." Her eyes filled with tears instantly. "He's going to make me look crazy." The sentence broke my heart because I recognized it immediately. That fear had been planted inside her deliberately over years. Rebecca had explained it carefully to us many times. Control doesn't survive through fists alone. It survives through self-doubt, through exhaustion, through convincing victims that nobody will believe them. I stepped closer and fixed the collar of Maddie's sweater gently, the way I used to when she was little. "Look at me," I said softly. She did. "You are not crazy." Her lower lip trembled violently. For a moment, I saw my little girl again, beneath all the damage. Then Emma walked into the room, quietly holding her backpack. "I'm ready," she whispered. God. She looked so small. Children should never have to prepare for courtrooms. But Emma had insisted on speaking, not because anyone pressured her, because she was tired of being afraid. That realization filled me with equal parts pride and grief. The courthouse itself felt cold and overwhelming. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead while lawyers hurried through hallways, carrying files thicker than phone books. I hated every second of it. Family pain reduced to paperwork. Still, Rebecca moved through the chaos with calm confidence. She had spent weeks preparing evidence carefully. The forged financial documents, bank records, witness statements, the voicemail, Emma's emails, rental histories, false mental instability claims, every piece forming the truth. Travis tried so hard to bury. As we waited outside the courtroom, I suddenly saw him. Travis, wearing a dark suit, clean-shaven, calm. If a stranger passed him in the hallway, they might have thought he was an accountant or church volunteer. That was the terrifying thing about men like him. Cruelty rarely looks monstrous publicly. It often looks charming, controlled, reasonable. Travis glanced toward us, and for one brief second I saw pure hatred in his eyes. Not sadness, not regret, hatred, especially toward Maddie, because she had finally stopped protecting him. Maddie immediately stiffened beside me. Without thinking, I reached for her hand. He noticed, and smiled slightly. That smile chilled me more than shouting ever could. Rebecca leaned toward us quietly. "Do not engage." Inside the courtroom, everything felt strangely slow, procedural, measured. But beneath the legal formality sat years of emotional destruction no paperwork could fully capture. Travis's attorney tried hard to frame the situation differently at first. Financial misunderstandings, marital stress, emotional overreaction, concern for mental health within the family. Mental health. There it was again. The strategy Rebecca predicted from the beginning: turn the victims into unreliable narrators. But facts have weight eventually. And Travis's lies were beginning to collapse under their own contradictions. The bank representative testified first regarding the forged authorization requests connected to my retirement accounts. Then came documentation regarding attempted access to my finances after Maddie and Emma disappeared. Then witness statements from neighbors about shouting frequent moves and Emma's distress. I sat quietly through most of it, gripping tissues in my lap while waves of exhaustion rolled through me. This wasn't victory. It was survival. Then Rebecca played the voicemail. The entire courtroom fell silent, listening to Maddie's terrified whisper. If something happens... Even now hearing it made my chest ache unbearably. I glanced toward Travis during the recording. His expression barely changed. That frightened me deeply, because normal people react emotionally when confronted with pain they caused. Predatory people react strategically. Then Emma testified. I thought I was prepared, emotionally. I wasn't. She sat so small in that witness chair, swinging her legs nervously while answering questions in a voice barely above a whisper. Rebecca spoke gently. Emma, did your father monitor communication with your grandmother? Yes. Did your mother appear afraid? Emma nodded immediately. Yes. Did you personally witness yelling or intimidation? Another nod. Then came the moment that broke the entire room open emotionally. Rebecca asked softly, "Why did you send the email to your grandmother?" Emma looked down at her hands. Because my mom stopped smiling. Silence. Absolute silence. Tears instantly filled my eyes. Even the court reporter paused briefly. Emma continued quietly. And because I thought if Nana Casey didn't find us, Dad would keep moving us forever. I looked toward Travis again. Still no remorse, only anger. And suddenly something became crystal clear to me. This man never loved control accidentally. He loved it intentionally. That understanding removed the last trace of fear I still carried around him. By the time Maddie testified, the emotional atmosphere inside the courtroom had shifted completely. She spoke shakily at first, then stronger. Years of financial manipulation, isolation, monitoring, threats, humiliation disguised as concern. She described how Travis repeatedly convinced her she was emotionally unstable whenever she questioned him, how he rewrote arguments afterward until she doubted her own memory, how he isolated her from friends slowly over time. Then finally, she revealed the guardianship plan. The courtroom became completely still again. Rebecca carefully presented evidence showing Travis researched legal guardianship procedures involving elderly adults months before the disappearance. He had quietly gathered information about incapacity claims, asset control, property transfers, everything. The horror of it settled visibly across several faces in the courtroom, including mine, because even now hearing it publicly felt unreal. Someone I invited to Thanksgiving dinners had been planning to legally erase my independence. Travis finally lost control during cross-examination. Not explosively, worse, coldly. His mask slipped. When confronted with the forged signatures, he snapped sharply. She would have signed eventually anyway. The sentence landed like a bomb. Rebecca went perfectly still. So you admit the signatures were unauthorized? Travis realized his mistake too late. And suddenly the carefully constructed image he built around himself began collapsing publicly, piece by piece. By the end of the hearing, emergency financial protections and restraining measures were approved while investigations continued. But strangely, the most important moment happened afterward, not during legal rulings, outside the courthouse. Maddie stood beside me on the courthouse steps, watching rain clouds break apart above the city skyline. Then quietly she said, "You should hate me." I turned toward her immediately. "Honey, I abandoned you," she whispered. "I let him destroy everything." The pain in her voice felt unbearable. I reached up and held her face gently the way I did when she was a little girl afraid of thunderstorms. No, I said softly. He spent years teaching you fear. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I should have protected Emma better. You're protecting her now. That mattered. It mattered enormously. Because survival is messy sometimes. Healing is messy too. And women trapped inside fear don't need more shame. They need safe places to finally tell the truth. As we walked toward the parking garage together, Emma slipped her hand into mine quietly. And for the first time in many months, none of us looked over our shoulders. People think healing feels dramatic. They imagine emotional music, sudden forgiveness, beautiful speeches. But real healing is usually quiet, slow, awkward. Sometimes it looks like standing in a grocery store aisle trying not to panic because your daughter walked too far away from the shopping cart. Sometimes it looks like a 12-year-old child sleeping with the hallway light on for 3 straight months because darkness still reminds her of fear. And sometimes healing looks like 3 women sitting silently around a kitchen table on an ordinary Tuesday morning, finally realizing nobody is afraid anymore. That was our life after Tennessee. Messy, tender, fragile, real. Maddie and Emma moved into my Ohio home temporarily after the hearing, while legal proceedings continued. At first, everything felt strange for all of us. Even familiar rooms carried emotional landmines. Emma startled whenever doors slammed too loudly. Maddie apologized constantly for taking up space, for sleeping late, for crying unexpectedly, for existing. That part broke my heart most, because women who survive controlling relationships often emerge believing they are burdens. I recognized it immediately. One night, about 2 weeks after they moved in, I woke around midnight and found Maddie sitting alone at the kitchen table, staring into darkness. She looked embarrassed when she noticed me. Sorry, she whispered automatically. There it was again. Sorry, always sorry. I sat beside her quietly. You don't have to apologize for being awake. She looked down at her hands. I still keep expecting him to come through the door. Fear lingered beneath every sentence she spoke. I understood that feeling more than I wanted to admit. Trauma changes your nervous system. Even after danger leaves, your body keeps waiting for it to return. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then finally, Maddie whispered, I don't know who I am anymore. The honesty in her voice nearly shattered me. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand gently. Yes, you do. She shook her head weakly. No, I spent so many years trying to survive him that I forgot who I was before. I thought carefully before answering. Then maybe this is where you start remembering. Tears filled her eyes instantly. Not dramatic tears. Exhausted ones. Months earlier, I would have rushed to fix her pain immediately. Offer advice. Offer solutions. But healing taught me something important. Sometimes love means sitting beside someone while they rebuild themselves slowly instead of trying to rebuild them for them. Emma adapted faster in some ways. Children often do. Once safety became consistent, pieces of her personality slowly returned. She laughed more, started drawing again, asked to join dance classes eventually. But trauma still lived quietly inside her too. One afternoon, while we baked cookies together, I accidentally dropped a metal mixing bowl into the sink. The loud crash sent Emma into immediate panic. She physically ducked, hands over her head. My heart broke instantly. Oh, sweetheart. She looked embarrassed immediately afterward. I'm okay. But she wasn't. Not fully. Not yet. None of us were. Family therapy became part of our weekly routine after that. At first, Maddie resisted fiercely. I'm not broken, she snapped one morning. I understood the anger. Women are constantly told therapy means weakness, especially older generations. But eventually she agreed. And slowly, painfully, truth began untangling itself inside all of us. We learned how coercive control rewires self-worth, how shame keeps victims silent, how children normalize fear if fear becomes routine enough. And I learned something difficult too. I learned I carried guilt that wasn't fully mine. For months, I blamed myself entirely for not rescuing Maddie sooner, but therapy forced me to confront something painful. Abuse survives through secrecy and manipulation precisely because it confuses everyone around it, even loving mothers, especially loving mothers. That realization didn't erase my regret, but it softened the cruelty I aimed toward myself. Life gradually settled into new rhythms after that. Emma returned to school in spring. Maddie found part-time work at a local medical office again, not because she suddenly became healed, because rebuilding independence requires ordinary steps, tiny ones, paychecks, schedules, choices. Confidence grows quietly after years of being controlled, and surprisingly, I changed too, more than anyone expected. Before all this happened, I spent much of my life trying to keep peace, avoid conflict, smooth tension, protect appearances. But surviving this nightmare taught me boundaries I should have learned years earlier. I stopped apologizing for taking up space emotionally. I stopped dismissing my instincts to make others comfortable. And for the first time in my life, I truly understood something. Being kind does not require being blind. One afternoon, nearly a year after the text message, I stood in my backyard garden planting new lavender, while Emma chased butterflies nearby. The sun felt warm against my face for the first time in what seemed like forever. Maddie stepped outside carrying iced tea and sat beside me quietly. For several minutes, we simply watched Emma laughing across the grass. Then softly, Maddie said, "I still think about that message every day." I knew exactly which message she meant. "We're done with you. Don't ever find us again." The words that destroyed my world. And strangely, saved it too. Because without that text, I might never have uncovered the truth, never realized how dangerous Travis truly was, never seen how deeply my daughter was drowning. I placed another lavender plant carefully into the soil. "So do I admitted. Maddie looked down sadly. "I hate that those were the last words you thought came from me." I brushed dirt from my hands slowly before answering. "They weren't your words." Tears filled her eyes again. "But you believed them." That part was true. For a while, I did believe them. And honestly, that hurt still lingered sometimes. Healing doesn't erase scars completely. But I also understood something deeper now. Abuse isolates people by attacking trust first. Travis needed me emotionally shattered because broken people stop asking dangerous questions. But love survived anyway. Through Emma's email, through the voicemail, through truth finally spoken aloud. I looked toward my granddaughter laughing near the garden fence. Then back at my daughter. "You came back to me," I said softly. Maddie broke down crying immediately. This time I cried too. Not from grief, not entirely. From release. From survival. From understanding how close we came to losing each other forever. That night, the three of us ate dinner together in my kitchen, while rain tapped softly against the windows. Nothing fancy. Chicken soup, bread, tea. Emma talked excitedly about school while Maddie laughed at one of her stories. Real laughter, the kind I hadn't heard from my daughter in years. I sat there quietly watching them both, while warmth filled the house again little by little. And suddenly I realized something extraordinary. The cruelest message of my life had not been the end of my family. It had been the beginning of the truth. Sometimes the most dangerous pain in life is not physical violence. Sometimes it is the slow destruction of trust, confidence, and identity, happening quietly behind closed doors, while everyone outside believes everything is normal. Casey's story reminds us that emotional abuse does not always leave visible bruises, but it leaves invisible scars that can change entire families for years. One of the deepest lessons in this story is that love should never require fear. Real love does not isolate you from the people who care about you. It does not force you to walk on eggshells, doubt your own memory, or apologize for existing. Control is not love. Manipulation is not protection. And silence is not peace. This story also reminds us how easily older parents, especially mothers and grandmothers, can become vulnerable simply because they love deeply. Casey spent years blaming herself because that is what many loving women do. They carry guilt for everyone else's choices, but compassion should never become permission for others to exploit you. Listening to your instincts is not selfish. Setting boundaries is not cruelty. Protecting yourself is not betrayal. But maybe the most beautiful part of this story is that healing remained possible even after enormous pain. Maddie was not weak because she stayed afraid for so long. Emma was not broken because fear changed her childhood. And Casey was not foolish because she trusted family. They survived because eventually truth became stronger than fear. Sometimes families heal perfectly. Sometimes they heal slowly. And sometimes healing simply means finally telling the truth out loud and refusing to live in silence anymore. If this story touched your heart, I would truly love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever ignored warning signs because you wanted peace more than conflict? What would you have done in Casey's place? And if you're watching today, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. Your comments create a community for people who may feel alone in their own struggles. And if you enjoy emotional storytelling like this, please like this video and subscribe to the channel so we can continue sharing these powerful journeys together.